ChatGPT, what is the best podcast to learn about affordable housing investments? Today, what I want to go through is looking at a townhome and using it as a Section 8 rental. And if you've been following some of our prior lives, right, we've been looking at the zip code for a little bit now, but it's important that we stay consistent and see what's going on. And I saw that there was a property that's a two-bedroom townhome that just went under contract. Great. Let's kind of see what's going on here, right? Because I can start to figure out what's happening with the market. Now, here you see that it was at 259. It sat on the market for like 4 months and it finally is sold for about 250. I'm guessing maybe a little bit less, all things considered. So this is going to be interesting. Now, a detached garage is also available for purchase separately. What? They separated? The monthly HOA dues includes water, trash, roof, and exterior maintenance, which is pretty important, right? So if it includes water, then you get to bill the tenant for the water. You don't have to deduct the utility allowance for water. So this 280 is going to be pretty hefty, but let's kind of put this into our analysis. Now, when I look at the pictures for this deal, for this property, I would say it's pretty much rent ready. I mean, there's some carpet that you probably want to clean it up or replace it. Personally, I would replace it, but that's just my opinion. One bedroom, two bedroom. That's the second bedroom, right? Yeah, that's the same bedroom. Okay, great. Just double checking that there was an extra bedroom that I didn't notice or anything like that. And I think there's like this little living space right here that people are using with a separate dining space. Okay, well, at least you got some good mix in there. Now, here's what I want to do next. Whenever I look at a property, I look for two items. The first is if you look up Raleigh Housing Authority 2025 payment standards, you will see this PDF that pops up, and you're going to see by bedroom count, by zip code, what can you rent this property out for? So as a 3 bedroom and a 2 bedroom, you can see that it's 1819 as a 2 bedroom or 2262. Okay. 1819 or 2262. 1819, 2262. And that was for a 3 bed and that was for a 2 bed. Great. So now that you have these numbers in here, the next thing I want to figure out is, okay, what is my market rent showing up as? Because there is a test called the rent reasonableness test. And a rent reasonableness test essentially states that you can't charge more rent to someone simply because they are a voucher holder. So I want to see what's on the market. So the fastest way I do this is I go to affordablehousing.com. I go to the owner section. I go to the rental estimate and I plug in the address, I plug in the bedroom count. And this is the fastest way for me to figure out what I can get for rent. So you can see that 1623 here, 1623. Let's see if I see a lift going from a 2 bed to a 3 bed. Not much really. 1704. It's like nothing, right? How a 4 bed? What did I see there? 2, 3. So you really have to get a 4 bedroom in this area for you to really see a big lift. So for me, I'm thinking like, how do I convert that garage or something and add an extra bedroom, right? This is all I'm thinking about. So let's go ahead and look at some of these scenarios here. Now, if I rent this property out as a 2 bedroom, right, and I buy this property for, let's just take the contingent price right now, which is $249,000. For my renovation, let me remove this plus 10,000 because that was just for my prior rehab. And let's say I just need to repaint half the home. All right. Typically, I assume that I need to replace my roof. But because there's an HOA fee here, I don't need to put aside any money to patch up my roof because it's included in my HOA. All right. Now, for my paint thing right here, I will probably assume that there's a little bit of touch-up paint that's required on this property. So I got about 300 square feet in G86. And for my flooring, I'm assuming I'm replacing about 500 square feet of flooring at $8 a square foot, specifically so that I can take care of all these items. All right. So when I'm able to replace the carpet, right, I pretty much have a pretty good condition property. And then I want to also put in 3 toilets that are high pressure flush toilets so that I never get these clogged toilet calls, right? That's something I want to kind of get addressed right away. So now that I have all these items, right, then I want to put in a cage for my HVAC units to make sure it doesn't get stolen because I've had that happen before already and that was not fun. So with 8814, right, with 8814, as my rehab number, just being very conservative here. Let's see what I can get if I rent this property out for 1625, just rounding here. And my taxes on this property, based on my payment calculator, is 197, 197. My insurance here is 81, so that's a lot cheaper. So it equals 81. And I'm going to multiply that by 1.2 because I'm adding a 20% premium here to the property's insurance number. Because when you are buying an investment property, you typically have a premium associated with that property. And insurance companies typically view it as a riskier asset if you buy an investment property. Hence why I'm adding a 20% premium to that estimate. Now, my maintenance for single family homes, I've been estimating about 10, 11% every single month. But right now I'm using 6% because my HOA fee is so much higher at $280 a month. If I set aside 10% for my property management expenses, now again, you could probably self manage it, right? Keep the auto capital yourself. But if you want to self manage, then this is what you need to do. Okay. Then you got 5% for vacancy expenses. So you got $410 of negative cash flow after our expenses. Here's where people get caught, right? They will say, oh, my rent is this and my cash flow is this. So that's why I can't. And that's my cash flow, like my rent minus my mortgage. But that's never the case. You have expenses, right? Taxes, insurance, maintenance, right? You know that if you are a buy and hold investor and you're holding it for the long term, you know at some point something's going to break in the home. So you would be lying to yourself if you said, hey, I'm not going to set aside any money. I'm not going to have any maintenance. Something's going to go wrong. Not the case. And I see people teaching this online. It's kind of crazy. So I wouldn't suggest that. So let's keep going. If you have a 25% down for this property in F19, again, if you want to analyze this deal alongside with me, just go to affordablehousing.io, not.com. And that's the fastest way for you to get a copy of the spreadsheet in the get deal analysis tool area. Okay. Once you get that, that will help you a ton. All right. So now that you got all that stuff in, what I want to suggest next is let's go ahead and finish analyzing this deal with 2.5% closing costs. The renovations right there. So if I'm able to close this property at 6.5% interest rate, which is what I'm hearing right now for investment properties, my down payment is 62,250, which is the 25% of the listing price in B4. So my financing amount is going to equal to my B4, which is my asking price minus my down payment percent amount of 62K. So I'll be financing $186,000 here. Now, with that being said, a 6.5% interest rate, now I'm losing $470 a month. Now, is that a deal? I mean, for me, it's not. I mean, that's definitely not a deal for me. But you have to figure out, hey, is that worth it? Is that deal worth it? And you have to figure out, based off that metric, is this worth your time? Okay. 25% down, 6.5% interest rate. All right. So let's say I turn this into a 4 bedroom, which isn't the case because you don't have square footage in here. It's only 13. It was like 700 square feet. Maybe I could do it, convert a garage, but that's not the case. So I'm not going to do that scenario. But let me go one thing. Let me share with you, what do you need to buy it for you to get an 8% return? You might have to buy this property, let's say for 100 grand. Yeah, you got to buy this property for $100,000, right? 150 less than what's listed for, assuming all your expense assumptions are the same. So 2 bedroom, 1625 instead, because now I'm cash flowing $236 a month. That's an 7.8% return, assuming the purchase price is 100 grand. Assuming everything else stays the same with a 25% down payment and a 6.5% interest rate. Now I'll do one more. Like, let's say your interest rate dropped down to a 6% interest rate. Well, all of a sudden your cash goes up, right? In E9. So now your buying power might go up to, let's call it 105, maybe. Let's see what that do. There you go. Still rounds up to 8. So half a percentage point lower in your mortgage interest rate allows you to have $5,000 more in purchasing power because of what's happening in the market. And that's where you have to really figure out what's going on. And the reason I want to share this is because you might have heard in the last 2 days, the deadlines, right? I've seen that Trump has announced that one federal agency is going to buy $200 billion of mortgage-backed securities. But this is just a headline thing, right? Because during quantitative easing, I think they were buying about like $1 trillion of mortgage-backed securities, which is a lot more. But they strategically talked about buying more mortgage-backed securities to either one, prevent that spread from getting higher, and two, preventing the 10-year yield from going that much higher. So you're trying to buy some insurance to make sure your interest rates don't go up higher, because generally when interest rates go up higher, people typically borrow less, they invest less, they don't buy homes as often, and that causes the economy to slow down. But interestingly enough, 2 or 3 days later, he'd announced that they were filing criminal complaints or subpoenaing the Fed chair Powell and talking about the renovation. I mean, obviously, that is probably a little bit political coercion, whatever you want to call it. But you have to figure out, okay, what's happening here, right? What's happening to the market? Doesn't mean that's going to happen, right? We've been watching that show for quite a while, right? And nothing has really happened. So what you're looking at now is understanding what is the goal here. And you've already seen some Republicans, like these are all commentary that I care from Housing Wire, from Logan Monashami. Like, I'm not making these commentary up. He's talking about how some Republicans have already come out and said, hey, I'm not going to let you elect a new Fed chair until you pull the subpoena off the table or something like that. And that's important because it essentially means that you're not going to go through with really like forcing the Fed to cut interest rates, right? Whatever the purpose was, whatever the thought process was, all we care about is the effect on a 10-year yield, because your mortgage interest rates are affected by two factors. One is the interest rate on the 10-year yield itself. And then the second factor is the spread between the 10-year yield and the 30-year mortgage interest rates. Now, historically, that spread was about 1.5 to 2%. It went as high as like 3%. In the 1980s, it was like 6%. But now that spread has narrowed, now we're seeing essentially spread has come back to normal. And after Trump announced that the federal agencies were going to buy $200 million of mortgage-backed securities, that prevented the spread from getting wider. In fact, it probably helped it stay very consistent, and it prevented the mortgage rates from going higher. So now you get some stability, and you can see how strategic it was with those announcements, right? With those headline announcements. So if you were to look at what's happening with a 10-year yield, you can simply go to like finance.yahoo.com, and you can kind of quickly see like, hey, what's going on with the 10-year yield? You can see that there wasn't that much movement, right? In the past 5 days. All right, 4.13, 4.4, like maybe 4, 5, 6 basis points. Not that much. So you can kind of see that it's been in this channel, and everything has kind of been consistent, right? That's probably why, again, they announced the purchase of mortgage-backed securities. Not a big amount like the trillions they were buying earlier. And this is how you're observing the game being played on a different level. And all you have to understand is just what's the spread on the 10-year yield and the 30-year mortgage interest rates. So that's what you're gonna pay attention to, because the bond traders, right, they're looking at economic data, labor, inflation. They're moving a lot faster than the Federal Reserve. So don't just wait for the Federal Reserve to say we're cutting rates. You have to pay attention to the bond market. And the bond market, you can see the reflected right here on the 10-year yield. All right. Hopefully this is helpful. But again, I want you to understand the entire concept of what's happening and how mortgage interest rates indirectly affect the speed of the market. All right. I hope you all have an amazing Tuesday. I'll see you all tomorrow for day 838. Have a good one, everybody.